my plan for today is to repot these tomato plants. So I actually repotted these about 2 weeks ago. And when I repotted them then, I buried them up to where their first set of little leaves had come out. The little seedling leaves, not the first set of real leaves. I buried them up till then. And as you can see, in about 2 weeks, they've more than doubled their height. And ideally, if this was later in the season, I'd be able to put these outside to harden them off and be ready to put them in the ground with some water walls. But that's not the case this year because of how fast they grew. So what I'm going to do this time is put them in larger pots. So what I'll do is I'll break off the lower limbs that won't fit well down in the pot, and I'll bury them as deep as I can. Now, one of the perks with tomato plants to being able to bury them this deep is they have all these little hairs on them. And everywhere that are those little hairs, they will put out roots. And so that's why I want to move them into larger pots and then root them or bury them in the dirt so that they will root. They'll have an even better root system when I go to put them in the ground. And it'll also reduce the risk of them getting root bound in these pots. When you buy tomato plants at the store, a lot of people like to go for the ones that just look the best. But there may be problems with that. So when you go to buy tomato plants like in a store, you want to look at the base that's sticking out of the dirt. And if it's already turning purple, that's a good sign that your plant is already root bound. And if it is really purple, then it's liable to be very stunted. So when you're buying them at the store, you want to pay attention to that and buy the ones that have not turned purple yet. Those are typically not root bound and will give you better, healthier plants for your garden. What I'm going to do is I have my big pot of soil here. I like to mix my dirt up here. I'm going to add some water to this and then just kind of mix it around a bit. I want my soil to be a little bit damp. It helps with the plants that are going in it. And I don't want it too damp, and I'll finish watering them off later tonight after I transplanted them. When you transplant your plants in the garden as well, you want to water them then and make sure that way you kind of don't stunt the roots by surprising them too much to moving into an environment that doesn't have the same moisture and type of soil that they're used to. So I'm going to put just a little bit in the bottom, not a ton, but just a little bit because I want to really bury the plant. I'm going to pinch some of these little leaves off. They were already about ready to fall off. Okay. Do you see this little area in between, like here and here? Those are suckers that are fixing to start. Now, if you're putting your plants in the garden, you may want to break those suckers off. It helps keep the plants a little bit thinner. They won't get quite as bushy, and so the fruit that is produced will be larger because the more of the energy from the plant will go into that smaller section of fruit. It also helps to try to cut down on, like, especially in the area I am, there's a lot of humidity. And so we get a lot of diseases that are very humidity related. And so by me going through my garden and breaking those off, it keeps the airflow moving through my plants better. And it gives me healthier plants. But also if you let those get a little bit bigger and you break them off and stick them down in some water or some dirt, especially like real wet dirt, they will root and then you can get more plants off of one plant. So I've done that in the past. If I went through, that way I didn't have to start new seeds and be that far behind. I had suckers on them that I hadn't broken off because it had been like a week that were like this size. And I just went through, broke those off, put them down. My mom has a hydroponic garden system, so I put some in there. And they put roots out the fastest. They also had some fertilizer in the water. And I did some just in a glass of water. They all put down roots. Once I had some decent roots on them, put them down in dirt. I hardened them back off because I had taken them inside to a more sheltered environment. And then after about 2 or 3 weeks, I put them back in the garden and I had plants, this size again. So just something to think about. But I'm going to break these off. When you are pruning your plants, you want to make sure you get kind of a clean edge. Okay? You don't want to leave it jagged. And you don't want to pull it down because then it'll peel. Think like string cheese and you just kind of peel it through. You don't want to do that either. So this one in particular has not become root bound, but I do have some really good roots forming. And I like that. I do like to see that. I'm just going to kind of loosen them up just a little. It'll encourage the roots to spread more. And I know my plants are looking a little droopy right now. That's mainly because I knew that they needed watering. Yesterday was their water day. And I skipped it because I thought I was going to do this yesterday. And I ended up doing it today. So they got like a little sprinkle enough to tide them over, but not what they needed. But they will perk right back up. I haven't let them go too far yet. And to be honest, if they have, it's kind of okay, considering how early these plants are right now. I still have time to start over. If this was later in the season, I would be a little more worried about killing my plants. Which I do not intentionally go around trying to kill my plants. Okay, don't get mistaken there. So, has anybody ever started stuff from seed? Do you have any other tips for growing tomatoes or anything else? I have mostly just done tomatoes and peppers. This year I've got some rosemary, and I started some flowers. I actually have flowers blooming, and it's the first time that I've ever made flowers bloom under like a grow light. Come on. I buried it a little bit crooked, but there we go. I am trying to keep the dirt off of the leaves, just for healthier plants in general. And voila. One down, 35 more to go. Alright, so, I need to add some more water. And I apologize, I do get really distracted very easily. So sometimes it may go on a bit of a tangent when I'm talking, so I apologize in advance. But what I really wanted to do today was also talk to you about what is occupational therapy, and why I'm including that as part of my stuff with my YouTube channel. So the more condensed version of what is occupational therapy. It is a holistic based therapy, or holistic based science as well, that focuses on meaningful and purposeful engagement and participation so that an individual has the opportunity, and we are supporting the optimal health, physical, mental, social, well-being and health. So we're really looking at the person as a whole and helping them to do the things that are meaningful and purposeful to them, despite any disease or injury or anything like that. Occupational therapist, one of the reasons I feel like it's not as well known is because we do work in such a variety of settings. So people know what OT does based on their setting. And I found this out more so when I was working my last job. I worked in a hospital. And so I worked inpatient, working with adults, but I also worked outpatient with adults and pediatrics. And so when I was working with the kids, and I'd say something like, oh, I have kids, and they'd be like, what are kids coming in for? Because they saw, oh, this one's got really good roots. I don't know how well you can see that. I'm trying to find where my camera's focusing. That one's got really good roots up near the top. And they're like, what are you doing? Because in the hospital setting, I was focusing a lot on the self-care skills. Bathing, dressing, toileting. Somebody came in and had surgery. And now part of my job is to help them get back home safely and with as much independence as possible while they recover. And so they're like, well, what are you doing with kids? And I was like, well, with kids, we focus a lot on play, helping them learn different skills they need for play, for dressing, for school. And all of this comes back to what we call the areas of occupation. So there are 9 areas. This came out with the last occupational therapy practice and framework. It's the 4th edition. It was 8. They added in health management, which used to be under the instrumental activities of daily living, or what we call IADLs. And so they separated that and gave it its own standalone category. So we have ADLs, which are self-care or activities of daily living, where we focus on things like bathing, dressing, toileting, the things that you do for yourself. And then we have the IADLs, which are your instrumental activities of daily living. And that's where we look at things like community mobility, being able to get out and about, being able to do grocery shopping, being able to cook meals, caring for pets, caring for children, all those kinds of things. And then we have the health management, which is being able to manage your own health, medications, doctor's appointments, everything that kind of goes into that healthy lifestyle. We have rest and sleep. We have, you're looking a bit pitiful. Rest and sleep, play, social participation, leisure, education. Hold on. This is really bad. I forgot one. I had ADL, IADL, health management, rest and sleep, play, so that's 5, social, leisure, education, it'll come to me later. And I'll stick it in a tag at the bottom because it just completely slipped my mind. I don't remember what it was. But those are the areas that we look at. And so then depending on what setting you're in, it may guide kind of what you look at more. So like when I worked in outpatient and I was working with pediatrics, I was working more with like play, education, social interaction, participation skills, things like that. Working where I do now, I work more with I work in a subacute setting. So I work like a step down from the hospital. So like you go to the hospital for an emergency or for surgery. I work at the next step. So once you get out of there but you're not ready to go home, you go to a place like me. We usually have you for about 2 weeks. And the goal is to get you home from there. And so that is more the setting I work in, and I focus more on the activities of daily living and the instrumental activities of daily living, helping people get back to the point they need to be able to take care of themselves at home. And so that's one of the reasons that I feel like what OT does isn't as well known, and that just comes back from it's so diverse depending on what setting you work in. OTs that work in the school setting focus primarily on educational tasks. OTs that work in home health, they work a lot with the ADLs, the play, and they do a lot of like parent caregiver education. So each setting is a little bit different. And I feel like that's one of the reasons that OT isn't necessarily as well known, or people understand quite what we do. A lot of times I get mistaken for being like a CNA just because I'll help people with going to the bathroom. And I know that may sound like that's your job every day, but let me give you this situation. You're driving down the road, you have a car accident, and now you are in the hospital. You've broken your arm and your leg. You can't stand up by yourself because the doctor's got weight bearing restrictions. You can't pull with that arm. It's in a cast. You're in a lot of pain. You need to go to the bathroom. How are you going to get there? And it's even harder the younger you are, because at this point you are still used to having all of your independence, and you are used to being able to do all this for yourself, and you're very private. You've got a lot more perhaps modesty, but one of the first things you want to work on is not going to be walking down the hallway. The first thing people tell me is, I want to be able to use the bathroom by myself. Or I want to be able to be left alone on the toilet, because if their balance isn't good, we can't leave them sitting in the bathroom by themselves. They may fall off and get hurt, especially with a tile floor. And so that's when people start to learn more and more about what OT is once they encounter it. And that's one of the reasons I'm trying to include it a little bit more in my channel,